Tonight we dedicate the programme to one issue, the EU. Should we stay or should we go? That's the Granada Debate. Yes, it's a new year and this is our new show. Welcome to the very first Granada Debate. Tonight's question: would the North West be better off in or out of the European Union? As it stands, around 7,000 North West firms export to the EU, worth more than 25 billion. On the flip side, membership comes at a cost of tens of millions of pounds a day. What's best for business, best for jobs, best for you? This report from our political correspondent, Daniel Hewitt.
We send £55 million a day out here, and we only get 34 million back.
Red tape from the EU is preventing us from doing what we want to do.
It is the future of the United Kingdom that is at stake as a global world player.
Without that enormous amount of European funding, I think it's pretty clear there wouldn't be a Liverpool Science Park.
Those that want Britain to stay in Europe look to Liverpool for proof of what Europe can do for Britain. Ever flown from John Lennon Airport, £23 million of EU money helped expand it. Been to a concert at the Arena, EU funding helped build it. The museum, the cathedral, the successful European Capital of Culture bid, all part paid for by cash from the European Union. That's because in 1994, Merseyside was declared an Objective 1 region by the European Union. Put simply, Merseyside was one of the poorest areas in Europe and in desperate need of investment. So over the next 2 decades, £2 billion of European money would be spent here. Money that people here say would never have been spent by a British government.
Merseyside only received this enormous amount of European funding because it was off the pace in terms of its GDP compared to the European average.
Chris Musson runs Liverpool Science Park, home to world leaders in engineering and biotechnology. He says without EU money from Brussels, this place wouldn't even exist.
The size and scale of investment in terms of tourism, in terms of buildings, in terms of university, in terms of skills, the whole concentration and geographical focus had a big impact on the city. And I count Liverpool Science Park in that as well.
But not everyone credits the EU for Merseyside's transition to one of the fastest growing regions in Europe. Born and raised in Liverpool, UKIP's Paul Nuttall says it's wrong to say the city was simply handed a free ticket to the Euro millions.
For every £2.88 that Merseyside puts in to the European pot, it only gets £1 back. Okay, that is the economics of the madhouse. Of course, all of these things could have happened without the European Union. There's no such thing as European money.
He instead points to businesses like Totally Wicked here in Blackburn. They sell nicotine-based electronic cigarettes and employ 160 people in the northwest. This is a booming industry. And despite Public Health England declaring their products 95% less harmful than cigarettes, EU regulations now place a raft of restrictions on what they can sell and how they can advertise. Here they warn that EU laws could put them and many others out of business.
We're selling a product that does need some regulation, but it doesn't need overburdensome regulation, and red tape from the EU is preventing us from doing what we want to do. It's preventing us from moving forward in the way that we want to. Why would we be spending the income that we get from our customers on legislation and meeting legislation and regulations that are really unnecessary?
Could you put a cost on how much you think it's affecting your business?
It's going to be this year in the many hundreds of thousands of pounds, if not into 7 figures.
But there are no shortages of northwest-based businesses who say the UK would be worse off alone. The heads of Unilever, Bruntwood, United Utilities, Peel Holdings all want the UK to stay.
We will find it much harder to gain access into international markets. We will find it much harder to gain access into our neighbouring market, which will then be the European Union. We will find it much harder when our companies reach out to try and get deals abroad elsewhere. And we will find it much harder to attract inward investment into the United Kingdom.
The United Kingdom could find out as early as February what the rest of Europe thinks of David Cameron's proposed reforms. That could see a referendum take place within a matter of months. All eyes will then be on Manchester for an announcement that threatens to change the political landscape of Europe and beyond.
Daniel Hewitt there. Well, joining me in the studio tonight to debate, Seema Kennedy, who held on to South Ribble for the Conservatives at the last election with a 46% share of the vote. Before being elected to Parliament, she worked in the property business. Jim McMahon is Greater Manchester's newest MP after he won Oldham West and Royton for Labour at last month's by-election. He was also leader of Oldham Metropolitan Borough Council. Louise Bors was elected to the European Parliament in 2014 for UKIP. She's currently their health spokesperson. Louise stood to be MP for Knowsley in 2015. She came second. That meant you didn't win. Welcome all. Seema, I'll start with you. The Tory party, we know, is split. I don't know whether it's proudly split on Europe. Where do you stand, please, on the issue of EU membership?
Well, I'm waiting for the results of the renegotiations. This is a massive issue for all of us. Everybody watching tonight, and not just us as members of Parliament having a vote, but everybody out there. And what I want to see is that there's a good settlement for the British people, for our national security and our economic well-being going forward.
Waiting to decide yourself?
Yeah, I'm waiting to decide.
Jim, are you for or against?
Very clearly for. I think we would all accept it's not a perfect system, but I think on balance we're better off to be in than not.
No doubt where you stand, Louise. Now tell us why, and why do you think the North West should back your view, which is an exit?
Yeah, well, obviously being a UKIP MEP, obviously nobody is any question what my view will be. I think as we've just seen in the film, a lot of it is smoke and mirrors. People talk about trade. We saw it in the film there. Trade, people, the notion that we would not be able to trade with our European friends and allies is absolute, utter nonsense. We're not talking about trade, we're talking about political union, and this is the issue we have to talk about. It's not trade. We have a huge trading deficit with Europe. They sell to us far more than we sell to them, and if you think about it, can you imagine BMW or Volkswagen not being able to sell their cars to us? We are their biggest trading partner.
But I put it to you, in the same film, Liverpool, a no-brainer, £2 billion from the EU. That means possibly 50,000 jobs. Surely that is a good thing that the EU bought.
And again, smoke and mirrors. I was literally seething during that film. European money. There is no such thing as European money. It's our tax. It's everybody at home. It's their tax. And you know what? If they're telling us how to spend our taxation, just think what a better job we could do with it ourselves.
OK, Jim, differing view. Please tell us why you see it differently.
Well, I just think you have to look a bit wider than your own boundaries, and we are part of the European Union. I think we benefit because of that. And in the North West, there are something like nearly 500,000 jobs that are reliant on trade with the EU, and actually 250,000 of those are in manufacturing. Now, at a time when we're seeing the UK manufacturing base completely demolished over successive governments, any move to further erode that and affect it, I think we should fight very strongly against.
But Jim, you said it yourself, reliant on trade, and that's the important thing. Reliant on trade, not political union. Nobody is saying we will not be trading with Europe.
Is a fundamental part of the treaty and the project.
There's absolutely no way that those free trade agreements won't exist anymore prior to coming out of this political union. As I say, we are their biggest trading partner.
Louise, I put it to you, would any British government, whether a Tory government or Labour government, put that much money into one city, that much into Liverpool? Yes, we give to the EU, but that came directly to a city in our patch.
Well, I think the evidence says actually, the government at the moment doesn't, which is why we see such a massive capital investment imbalance where the majority of money goes to London and the rest of us are left to fight amongst ourselves for it. At least with the European Union, they do take into account deprivation. They do take into account areas that need an economic boost, which is why areas in the northwest have benefited. And we've seen on the video how strongly Liverpool have benefited. And I think people will see that.
Can I bring Seema
like you want to
Seema in on this? You're a champion of small business, and we saw a small business there in Blackburn clearly struggling with the weight of regulation linked to the tobacco directive. Do you have sympathy there? Maybe
I have massive sympathy.
Yeah.
As somebody who's run a small business, and I could see over all the years we did, and we were in the building trade, and certain environmental and employment regulations, yes, they are very burdensome for business, and that is a problem. But what the Prime Minister has tried to do is roll back on that, and that's part of his renegotiation to make Europe more competitive, because we have got many, many advantages in Europe. But there are countries out there, China being an example, let's not look at the stock markets this week, but we've got to think of the 21st century. We want for all our children and grandchildren to have a strong Europe, and that's in our own best interest.
Do they not accept, though, that it's a balance? Because, business needs to accept that what they would call burdensome red tape for many other people is protection. It's employment rights, it's protection from
speaking there of
mistreatment,
Mr. Cam, we know he's on his jet set tour of Europe making these deals, these offers, trying to secure it, as you say, and it will depend your vote on which way he goes. Well, today he was in Davos, and this is the words he had to say earlier today.
If there's a good deal on the table, I will take it, and that's what will happen. But I do want to be very clear. If there isn't the right deal, I'm not in a hurry. I can hold my referendum at any time up until the end of 2017. And it's much more important to get this right than to rush it.
I'm just wondering there, Seema, is he rowing back a bit? Is he buying more time? We heard earlier this week it could be as early as June, the referendum. He's hinting there he's running away a bit.
No, absolutely not. The important point is this was a manifesto promise. People were telling me in Leyland, in Penwitham, all over South Ribble, they wanted a referendum. That was a manifesto promise. It's a promise kept. By the end of 2017, there will be a referendum. The Prime Minister's acting in Britain's best interests.
His renegotiation does not add up to a row of beans.
But
we know that he's not asking, but he's not asking for anything. The things that people are really concerned about, free movement of people, immigration, all those kind of, are not even going to be touched. And at the end of the day, they will not be, because he hasn't got the power, because they would involve treaty change.
There's a lot of crystal ball change.
And you know what happened yesterday? Just a very, very quick point. What happened this morning in the European Parliament? This is what the EU think of referendums, okay? This morning in Strasbourg, I left early so I could come here to be with my colleagues. In Strasbourg, there was a vote on the Dutch referendum, okay? The Dutch referendum about their relationship with the Ukraine and the EU. And the vote was that the Dutch referendum, the outcome, must be respected by the European Commission, the European Parliament, etc., etc. And you know what? It was voted down. They would not respect the result.
That's what they think because we have been running our own poll on the ITV Granada Reports website, and we've been asking viewers to vote whether they think the North West has benefited from membership of the EU. Now, I'm not saying it's scientific, but so far, more than 80% telling us tonight they don't think there's been any benefit. Jim McMahon, please come in on that.
Well, I think we need to separate two things out. One is the real benefit and the real disadvantage of being in Europe, and everybody must accept it's a balanced relationship in that sense. I mean, any notion you can be part of a relationship, a family, and it's all one way. It's about Britain, and everybody else can just like it or lump it. I'm afraid it doesn't work like that in any mature relationship. You give and you take, and you reach a settlement, and I think that's what the system that we've got. Separate that out from what people perceive as part of the European Union, and I think perception in politics is very important. People do see European migration as a problem, and I was a leader of a council in a town that had the highest number of national insurance registrations from Eastern European migrations in Greater Manchester. Now that was adding pressure to low-paid, low-skilled jobs. But I turn it on its head and say, well, is the real issue that people want to come here and make a better life for themselves? Or is the issue that our skills system, our education system, is so weak that the most a lot of people in Oldham can aspire to is to get menial, low-paid jobs?
But
surely you've got to have a skills system in place that supports people to earn decent money in decent jobs, and an economy that can take that influx of people as part of a wider union.
But the word you used there, Jim, was perception. Isn't the perception that immigration is a problem? And there is talk that the EU may require Britain to take in up to 90,000 as a migrant quota in the future.
Can I just come in on this point about? I think there has been very, of course, naturally in the last few months, a lot of conflation of these two ideas of economic migrants from within the European Union and the appalling situation we see on our eastern borders of the Mediterranean because of the Syrian crisis. And I think we have to be very, very careful about dividing those two issues.
But the issue there is not that Britain is being expected to play its part in Europe. We must do that if we want to be taken seriously on the international stage. The issue is about our own domestic policy. So the way that we distribute asylum seekers across the United Kingdom means that there are heavy concentrations. Today there are more asylum seekers in Oldham and Rochdale than there is in London, the South East combined.
Yeah.
That's because of the dispersal in this country. But that's very different than us saying at an international level we have to play our part and do our fair share. We just need to make sure that we manage the impact on communities.
Yeah.
Are you concerned though that I believe that Labour lost votes in 2015 because some of your supporters went to UKIP, went to the Conservatives specifically on the issue of immigration?
Immigration's an issue that every community in Oldham will talk about, regardless of their background, their economic profile. What I would say though is that this referendum has got to be more than Britain being so kind of inward looking that we really affect our standing in the world on this. Because if we're not careful, the tone of this debate will be Britain thinks it's bigger than it really is, when actually the world is moving at a rate of knots and we're struggling to keep up with it.
Folks, I'll pause you there just for a second because we've been out and about with our cameras in the northwest asking people whether we should stay in or out. Let's just take a look now at some of the views we received.
Well, I think we should stay because I think leaving will affect jobs. Industry will move out, commerce will drop, and the economy in this country will suffer drastically if we leave the European Union. And I think, quite honestly, the bigotry and bias whipped up by politicians against the EU is an absolute disgrace, and it undermines the British economy.
I think that we should stay in it for trade and things like that. I think it's important to the country not to get cut off, but I also think we should leave as well so we're actually a bit more independent and we can make our own rules and regulations.
I think we should go out of it because it's done us no good as far as I'm concerned. We're following other people's rules, not our own.
I think we should get out of the EU so we can be our own independent country, and so they don't govern us what we need to do.
I didn't vote for us to go in common market to start with, and I want us out of the EU because I begrudge that 51 million going over to Brussels every day. Okay.
Interesting there, Seema. It's not so much immigration. They've come back on the economy, on democracy. Do you find encouragement in that?
I think the important thing is that everybody's going to have a vote on it because none of us, we're all too young in this room to have ever voted on it, so it's crucial. And the fact is that it's very different from what my parents voted for in the 1970s, and it's a project that has got a lot of flaws, and I think we all accept that. But we've got to focus on what is right for our national security and our economic security.
Seema, if there was a vote tomorrow, i.e. prior to concessions, how would you vote?
I'm not dealing in that situation because that isn't what's on the offer at the moment. Waiting for the renegotiation. I'm hoping that the Prime Minister's managed to veto EU treaties.
So you don't mind
before.
if the people of South will want to know now which way you go? You're asking them to wait.
I'm saying, what would be the point of me saying something when that's not the actual choice?
Jim, were you surprised? People there genuinely concerned about the economy, the money, or are they swayed by the newspaper headlines?
Well, I think it'll be a bit of both. I mean, there's no doubt that the national press have got a very particular view on Europe, and that, of course, does have an impact on public attitudes. There's no doubt about that. But we can't dismiss the things that people are saying because their own real-life experience will be bringing about concern. And I think it's a foolish politician that ignores that.
And again, you're said to have the voice of the people. What is the most pressing issue, do you believe? Because these people here, it's the economy, it's about their businesses.
I think actually, though, at the end of the day, I think it's very easy for politicians politicians, in whatever kind of situation, you hear people that they spew out statistics, and we can all have statistics to back up any argument and counter argument we like. But at the end, I think Jim is kind of touching on this as well. It's kind of a decision where we all have to decide what kind of Britain we want to live in, and that's kind of quite a passionate thing for people to think about. What kind of Britain do you want to pass on to your children? I think that is
21st century. That the feeling is if we exit, we're just a part of the northwest frontier of Europe without us.
No. I mean, I think that's also really sad when you hear politicians like the Nick Clegg during the Euro elections, during the general. Great Britain aren't big enough to stand up on their own 2 feet. We have to be part of this political union. We're the 5th biggest economy in the world. Of course, we can stand on our own 2 feet. We have a fantastic manufacturing base, entrepreneurs. The skills we have in this country are just wonderful. Of course, we can stand on our own.
No, but this debate is not about Britishness. This is not a sense of our own identity and who we are as a nation.
It is in a way.
I don't think it needs to be, because
Louise, can I just ask you that if we exit, if the referendum happens this year or whenever it happens, and we exit, it's goodbye UKIP. You don't need to exist anymore.
Well, of course, I think we do, because I think if we did exit, I think one thing that we have evolved from a single issue party into a political party now. So I think even without the Europe issue, people come to us for a variety of reasons, whether that's what we think on law and order, health, education,
do you
a
think
range of domestic
policies on that?
Absolutely. Now, I'm the first one to agree. When we're a very young political party, and obviously everything is a big learning curve. But I think now we've evolved into something which we have a core vote of like over 5 million people that vote for us, whether or not now, and that's a big chunk of Britain.
Can I ask you, each of you, people watching this, they see parties split amongst themselves, views split amongst this panel. How would you advise someone to go best about deciding which way to go? It's a big decision.
I know what you mean. So there's a range
Who do they trust?
There's a range of views in the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. Obviously not in UKIP. Although I don't know how well Mr Farage and Mr Carswell are getting on these days. I would say, and this is what I will base my decision on, when these renegotiations come back, will I look and think, is my country that I love so much going to be better for me and my children, in or out? And that's the basis I'll make my decision on.
Thank you, Seema.
Well, I mean, first of all, I'll clarify what I meant about British identity. So my view is you can be proud to be British, you can be proud of our past, you can have a strong identity that you feel connected to, which I do, but you can also be outward looking and want to be part of a bigger family, and that's the way I look at Europe. It's not about diminishing who we are as a nation, it's about being part of a wider family, and that's the view that I take. But
Thank you. I'll pause you there, Jim, because I need 30 seconds to bring in UKIP.
I think what people have to remember when they're taking this decision, and it is an important once-in-a-generation decision, they have to think they're voting for the EU, not as it is today, not as it is now, but how it's going to be in 20 years, and that's a very different prospect. It's an EU that involves Turkey, the Ukraine, Balkan states.
Thank you very much. This is a subject to which we'll return many times on the Granada Debate, I'm sure. But that's it for tonight. Keep the debate going on our Twitter feed. Please, that's Granada_debate.